What up, sports fans? Waxon Wednesday, Jake Waxman, Tom Level, two guys talk sports. Let's do this. Before I go into my show, into my Waxon Wednesday today, sports fans, I'd like to apologize for not doing a video last week. No excuses on my part. Should have found the time to do a video, and I didn't, so that's on me. I just want to apologize. Busy with the family members at Thanksgiving, but admittedly, I'm holding myself accountable, and I should have found time. So I do apologize once more for not putting a video out last week. I'm gonna put one out this week, so I do apologize once more. And without further ado, let's get the show on the road. All right, so okay, it was for two of my favorite teams. It was not a good Thanksgiving week. It was not. I think you know who I'm talking about, but I'll start it up. I'm going to start with the Chicago Bears. All right, so it was not a good Thanksgiving. They lost to the Detroit Lions, and a game they could have won or stolen. They could have stolen that Thanksgiving game in Detroit, that Thanksgiving Day game in Detroit. And the Bears were driving down the field, had a chance to win the game. But for some reason, now the clock was on the final play of the game, the clock was running. The Bears had one timeout left. Matt Eberflus could have used it, and for one reason or another, he chose not to use it. Stupid. Absolutely stupid. It cost the Bears the game. And Williams ended up throwing an incompletion as time ran out. Inexcusable time management. And another painful loss for the Bears. Another one that falls on Eberflus' shoulders. And you know what? As head coach of the Bears, he did not get much time to think about it, because the day after Thanksgiving, Matt Eberflus, he gone. Yep, he's been, for those of you who have not heard by now, Eberflus is no longer the head coach of the Chicago Bears. No longer. Good riddance. Good riddance. Should have been fired last year. And the reason I say that is because you're getting a new franchise quarterback anyway, so why not if you're gonna go get a new franchise quarterback, get a new coach to go with it. Start a new relationship of sorts. Rather than doing that, Bears GM Ryan Poles made the mistake of keeping Matt Eberflus around 1 year longer than he should have been around. The only thing that kept Matt Eberflus from being fired last season was that 6-game win, those 6 wins at the end of the season. They won a lot of games at the end of the season, and that's the one. And they had a better record than they had the previous season before, and that is the one and only thing that kept him from being fired last season, because I thought he should have been. And like I said, the reason I did not pick my Bears to make the playoffs was Matt Eberflus. And you know what? He hasn't won a road game since 2021. Or the Bears have not won a road... Actually, the Bears have not won a road game since 2021. Sorry about that. That's a big mistake on my part. But the point I'm trying to get here is, look, it had been long past time for Matt Eberflus to be fired. And you know what? Props to the Bears. They finally did it. They pulled the trigger during the season and not after the season. This is the first time in the Bears' 105-year history that they fired a coach before the season even ended. But it was long past time for Matt Eberflus to go. All right? He was not getting the job. Good guy, but he was not getting the job done. He couldn't win the big game. He couldn't win against Green Bay. Couldn't win against, Detroit. Couldn't win division games. Couldn't win road games. And you know what? You could talk about the Hail Mary breaking the Bears, but Matt Eberflus, and it was Matt Eberflus's idea to bring in Shane Waldron. That was a bad mistake. And now, with Eberflus out of the way, there's hope for Caleb Williams. All right, there is hope for him. And even before Eberflus got fired, there was hope for him because Thomas Brown, who is now the Bears' new offensive coordinator, he has done a great job helping Caleb Williams develop. And now he's going to be the interim head coach. So hopefully he gets an interview. At the very least, interview him. And if not a head coach, keep him as the offensive coordinator, because I like what I've seen from him. So with all that being said, so you guys are probably wondering, all right, Wax, you got what you want. Eberflus is out. Thank the heavens. Who do you want as the Bears head coach? All right, there are two people that are on my mind right now. Two guys. It's down to me. It's between two coaches. One is Ben Johnson, who is the Lions offensive coordinator, and I know Lions fans, you don't want to hear that. You don't want to see that happen, but he wanted to take the Bears job last season, but the Bears told him they were holding on to Eberflus for one more year. Could he still be interested in the job, even though they told him no last year? Maybe. We'll find out. All right. He would be a good fit. He would help Caleb Williams a lot. Great offensive scheme would be set up in Chicago around Ben Johnson's know-how. So that's a guy. So that's one of my top two. The other guy that I love to see as the Bears head coach, Mike Vrabel. I know he's a bit more defensive minded, but Vrabel is a great leader amongst men. Yes, he can unite a locker room together. And here's the thing. In terms of Caleb Williams, all he needs is a great offensive coordinator, someone who can help him. You know, I'm okay with the Bears having a defensive-minded coach, because the Bears are always defense first anyways. So, just give Caleb Williams a great offensive mind, whether it's just an offensive coordinator or a head coach and offensive coordinator. But when it comes to the Bears, okay, I want one of two guys, either Ben Johnson or Mike Vrabel. That's who I want. I think Vrabel will fit in both. I mean, Ben Johnson, you know, we'll see. He's definitely got a great offensive mind, but Mike Vrabel, he can provide the power. He can provide the spark that the Bears need, because he's that kind of guy. We've seen him. He can lead a locker room and can keep a locker room intact. And what happened in Tennessee was not all Vrabel's fault. I think Tennessee let him down big time. They traded away good pieces of that team. I know they had to get under the cap and that stuff, but they traded pieces like A.J. Brown, valuable pieces, were traded away. And Vrabel did the best with what he had. And yes, Tennessee did fire him, but you know what? That was a mistake, honestly. And I think Tennessee's going to regret firing Mike Vrabel. Currently, Vrabel's working for the Cleveland Browns, but it would not surprise me if the Bears at least give him a call and give him an interview. So, that's who I'd love to see. Either one of those two guys. Give me one of those two guys. Either Ben Johnson or Mike Vrabel is the new coach of the Bears. I'd want to see that happen so bad. But now, to finally close off this subject, like I said, yes, Matt Eberflus, you know, good guy, but wasn't getting the job done. And you know what? He should have been fired last year. When you take a look at all things, and considering the fact the Bears were getting a new quarterback, he should not have been around for that. He should have started anew. So, I wish Matt Eberflus all the best, and hopefully he finds his feet somewhere as a defensive coordinator. And now, speaking of head coach firings, okay, the other team. So both of my two favorite football teams, the Chicago Bears and the Purdue Boilermakers, both fired their head coaches around Thanksgiving. So, for those of you who don't know, Purdue went 1-11 this season. They won just one game and lost 11 games, and they beat an Indiana State team that was not that good. And the final game of the season against that rival down south in Indiana, Purdue, Kurt Signetti and the Indiana Hoosiers, they just absolutely burnt down the Purdue Boilermakers. Burnt them to a crisp. And the score was very ugly. 66-0. It was Purdue's third shut. It was the third time this season that Purdue had been shut out on the season. That is unacceptable. And I like Ryan Walters, but after that performance against Indiana, where you didn't even score a single point, he had to go. I'm sorry, but he had to go. Good guy, but he wasn't. But like Matt Eberflus, not getting the job done at all. And now people forget 2 seasons ago, the Purdue Boilermakers, they were in the Big Ten championship. They had a chance to win the Big Ten championship. Lost to Michigan, much better team. Purdue fought hard in that game, but didn't have enough to compete with Michigan. And just 2 seasons later, since that Big Ten championship, Purdue football has won just 5 games. 5 games. Ryan Walters went 5-19 in his 2 years at Purdue. I'm just going to be honest about Ryan Walters, okay? Good guy, but this was a job that he simply was not ready for. He was way out of his depth when it came to taking the job at Purdue. I think this is a coach that needed a lot more experience. When Purdue hired him, he had no head coaching experience. So my first thought was, oh, goodness, this is going to be a very risky hire. I hope Mike Bobinsky, the athletic director of Purdue, knows what he's doing here. And it was a swing and a miss for Purdue's athletic director. And look, I mean, he had a defensive. Here's the thing. Purdue excelled on neither offense nor defense. And by the way, Ryan Walters, defensive-minded coach. And his defense, it was one of the worst defenses in college football. Inexcusable. When you specialize in defense, you got to bring a great defense. And Walters just couldn't put it together. Or not even an okay defense. I wanted him to succeed. He had a good personality. But, as I said, this is a coach that needed to start his head coaching career at a smaller school and work his way up and then come to Purdue after a few years of experience working with in smaller leagues as a head coach. But he was given this kind of a job way too soon in his career, and this may have pretty much killed his coaching career. I hope he bounces back. Hope he finds a defensive coordinator gig somewhere in the country, and hopefully someday he can become a head coach. But he was not ready for this kind of job. Too much pressure, expectations, of course, and it's the Big Ten. The Big Ten, the Big Ten and the SEC in terms of college football, they are the two hardest conferences to be a college football head coach in. You got to be made of tough stuff to coach in that league. So, Walters, you know what? He was in over his head. He was overwhelmed with the responsibilities that came with being a Big Ten coach. He just wasn't ready for it, and it showed. I mean, I mentioned how bad the offense was. Defense was really bad, and getting shut out 3 times in one season. You just can't have that happen. And winning just one game this season when you were expected to progress and build off the 4-win season you had last year, just doesn't cut it. And, here's the thing. Purdue was actually looking. They were looking at keeping Walters for one more year. The 66-0 loss to Indiana, that doomed him. That is what ultimately, that was the final straw that broke the camel's back. Purdue was looking at holding on to him, but after seeing that game, Mike Bobinsky did the right thing and pulled the plug for good. Of course, a $9 million buyout. It's going to be expensive, but it's the right move for Purdue. Because with NLI, and by the way, Purdue football, and in terms of athletics, Purdue University, they need to invest more in the NIL program, all right? They need to get more money for football, or else this team's not going to compete for it. Or this team's going to have a hard time building 6-win seasons at the very least and being competitive. So, again, I wish Ryan Walters all the best. Good guy. Just wasn't ready for a job like this. But I have no ill will against him, unlike some Purdue fans from what I've seen. I wanted to see him succeed, but with that lack of experience and lack of know-how on how to, and here's the thing, Purdue football, in order for this program to succeed, it needs an experienced coach, a guy who's been a couple different places. That's why Jeff Brom was able to win at Purdue, because he had been at Western Kentucky and had built success there for a while before coming to Purdue. Walters had been a defensive coordinator at Illinois. He hadn't been a head coach just yet, so like I said, that's why he wasn't ready for a responsibility this big, such as being a head coach in the Big Ten. So, just way out of his depth. But I hope wherever he goes next, I hope he finds success, and hopefully he can bounce back from this, because he's got a good heart, wants to do what's best for every football team he's been a part of, and I wish Ryan Walters all the best. Now to answer another question you folks might have, who should Purdue look at pursuing in terms of a new football coach? I got a few options. My top 2 right now are both offensive-minded guys. Jamie Chadwell of Liberty and Jason Candle of Toledo. Both have great offensive minds, and both also, this is the thing that Purdue needs, a very experienced coach. Both of those guys have been coaching at their respective universities for over 7 years. And a little more than that. When you have, hey, that experience matters. Also, looking for a guy who can stabilize the program, keep guys who are hitting the portal from leaving the universe, have them come back. I want a guy who can bring coaches and players with them, and just overall, those are guys that I feel like can do that. Those two in mind. Another name to keep them. A lot of people are throwing out Dan Mullen and Charles Huff. I don't know. Dan Mullen, I'd be okay with that. And Charles Huff, honestly, that actually wouldn't be a bad hire considering Purdue would not have to pay a buyout. From what I've heard, he's the head coach of Marshall, and he has no buyout. Like, he has no contract for next year. So, hey, and he brings an offensive system. So, that's what I want. And here's the thing. While the Bears are historically a defense-first organization, Purdue is the opposite. I know it's college football, but Purdue's the opposite. Purdue plays offense first, then defense. Because Purdue, when they found their success under coaches like Joe Tiller, and as I mentioned, Jeff Brom, both of those guys were offensive-minded. Like, they played offense was the priority. And, I mean, Joe Tiller, we had basketball on grass, all right? Score a lot of points. And then you had, of course, Jeff Brom, consistent offense, you know? Or at least that prowess. Both of those guys made their name coaching offense. And that's how Purdue works. Purdue has found its success when it focuses primarily on offense. Offense first. Scoring points. And that's what I really want in a coach. A coach who can get as close to that basketball and on grass mentality as possible. And guys like Chadwell and Candle, I think, maybe even Huff, can get back to that prowess. So those are just a couple guys that I'm thinking of that can be the next Purdue football coach. Now, of course, me and Tyler have a show on Friday. I'll talk a little bit more about head coaching candidates I'd love to see for the Bears and the Boilermakers. And speaking of head coaches in hot water, the one everybody is talking about is Ryan Day. We all know that. For the 4th year in a row, Ryan Day lost to the Michigan Wolverines. And this was probably arguably his best opportunity to beat them because they didn't have Jim Harbaugh anymore. They had Doug Marrone, different coach, leading the charge for the Michigan Wolverines. And they were favored. It was at Ohio State too. And what happens? Ohio State loses 13-10. And that I don't think it's going to cost them their playoff spot, but it's going to come pretty close. And after that loss, and of course there was a fight, afterwards. But after that game, everybody was calling for Ryan Day's head. All right, and honestly, I can understand why. Losing 4 straight to your big-time rival in Michigan, that's no fun. And there was a point where Ohio State was dominating this rivalry. And Ohio State fans, they do not like that Michigan's won 4 in a row. Now, here's the thing. Do I think Ryan Day should be fired? No. Not yet. Okay? He still wins a lot and beats everybody else, okay? He consistently beats Penn State, who's a consistent contender in the Big Ten. All right? He wins the games he should, all right? The thing is, with Ryan Day, like, I'm not going to say he's the best football coach. Okay, Ryan Day is probably overrated as a football coach. Maybe he's not as good as advertised, and his talent carries him. You could say that. The big problem with Ryan Day is I don't think he appreciates the rivalry between Michigan and Ohio State. I think he does not take that game as seriously as he should. And especially I think he got caught looking ahead to the playoffs. And that's why they ended up losing. And you know what? He coached a piss-poor game against Michigan. So many missed field goals, but also, you know, Michigan's defense, they played hard, but Ohio State, there was just some play calls, like running up the gut on 3rd down. Like, come on. Ryan Day, you're better than that. Like, Ryan Day was playing way too conservatively in that game. I don't know if you could even say he coached scared of it. Like, he was nervous. Or coaching not to lose. There's been some games this year where Ohio State hasn't really crushed their opponents as much as they should. Hey, Ohio State, they got all the talent in the world, all right? They're talented. They should be winning a lot. I mean, you could say they should be winning every game of the season, but that's just not the case. Now, in a couple seasons, now when Jim Harbaugh was at Michigan, okay, the Michigan teams were better, all right? But Michigan this year had no business winning that game. And yet Ohio State handed them the win. Because you know what? Ryan Day, he effed around and he found out. Simple as that. So, I don't think he should be fired, but his seat is going to be very, very warm going into next year. He has to beat Michigan next year. And here's the thing. They're going to be in the postseason without doubt. I think their record speaks for itself. They only had 2 losses, and they got quality wins over teams like Penn State. They lost to Oregon, okay, who's a really great team. And, of course, things went wrong in that game as well. But the thing is, Ohio State fans, let's be patient, okay? Common sense, okay? Ryan Day's not going to get fired, and it's not time to do that just yet, all right? He still wins the majority of his games every single season. But one can make the case that he is probably the most, or one of, if not the most, overrated coaches in college football. Because there are games that I watch where this Ohio State team should crush their opponents, and they don't. And a lot of that has to do with Ryan Day's coaching style. I think he's just a little too conservative, and sometimes he's a bit too arrogant, too, I think. And also, people can go into about how he's calling out like sportscasters unnecessarily. Sometimes maybe he creates a bad vibe around Ohio State when there doesn't need to be one. I don't know. Regardless, okay, he's not going to get fired this year. Now, next year, if Ohio State misses the playoff picture and they lose to Michigan, then okay, that's grounds for firing Ryan Day. And what that will also show is, yep, he's overrated. Which, by the way, I think Ryan Day is overrated. I don't think the Buckeyes should fire him just yet because they're going to probably be in the playoffs this year, but that seat has got to be warm. Like, it's had not just lukewarm, like fire rising up. Because I think Buckeye fans are starting to get, if they haven't already, they got the sense already that Ryan Day is probably one of, if not the most, overrated coaches in college football right now. I think this is a man who is being carried by all the talent that he has recruited to the Ohio State University. All right, on to this day in sports history. And on this day, the 3rd of December, 1977. On this day, it would be the NFL's 5,000th game, with the Cincinnati Bengals beating the Kansas City Chiefs 27-7. All right, sports fans, that's all I got for this week's Waxon Wednesday. Hope you enjoyed it. And if you got any questions, leave them below, and I'll try to answer it in next week's Waxon Wednesday. Don't forget to follow us on YouTube and Facebook. All right, with that being said, that's all I got for this week. Thank you for watching. This is Jake Waxman from Two Guys Talk Sports, signing off.